There's a moment that some people carry with them for the rest of their lives. The moment they carry is a moment that lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds in an elevator. 4 seconds where Lucia looked at a stranger and decided he didn't matter.
She had no reason to think that Tuesday in March would be any different from the 100 Tuesdays before it. She had a schedule to keep, a reputation to maintain, and 22 years of hard work backing up every step she took through that lobby. He had a carry-on bag, a crumpled jacket, and the look of a man who'd been traveling since before sunrise. And in the 4 seconds it took for an elevator to arrive, she made a decision about him. What she didn't know, what none of the 4 people standing in that lobby knew, was that in 3 hours, she was going to watch that same man walk onto the main stage of that conference. In front of 1,400 people. With cameras rolling. She mocked a poorly dressed man. Then saw him on national TV. Stay with me. Because this story isn't just about one woman and one man and one very bad Tuesday. It's about something every single one of us does. Every day. Without realizing it. And by the time we're done here, I promise you, you are never going to look at a stranger the same way again. Before we go any further, I need you to sit with 3 questions. 3 questions that are going to pull this whole story together. Who exactly was the man she dismissed in that elevator? And why, on that particular morning, did he look the way he did? When she realized who he was, when his name appeared on that screen in front of 1,400 people, what did she do? Did she leave? Did she stay? Did she pretend she hadn't seen him? And what happened between them afterward, privately, quietly, away from every camera and every audience, that turned this story from a moment of public embarrassment into something none of us saw coming? I'll tell you this right now. The part that went viral, that's not the most interesting part. The part nobody talks about, the part buried in a chapter of a book most people skimmed right past, that's the part that's going to stay with you. But to understand any of it, you need to understand who these 2 people were before they ever ended up in the same building. And that means we need to go back. She grew up in a working-class family in the Midwest. Her father worked in manufacturing. Her mother managed the books for a small family business. They weren't poor, but they weren't comfortable either, and she understood from a very early age that comfort was something you built, not something you inherited. So she built. By her mid-20s, she had a degree, an entry-level coordinator position at a regional firm, and a reputation for being the person who stayed latest and arrived earliest. By her 30s, she was managing a team. By her early 40s, she was a regional director. 22 years. No shortcuts. No nepotism. No lucky break handed to her by someone who owed her father a favor. Just work. People who knew her professionally described her almost universally the same way. Formidable. Precise. Someone you wanted on your side and absolutely did not want as an opponent. But here's the thing about people who fought hard for everything they have. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the armor they built to survive the climb never quite comes off. And the part of them that learned early to sort people fast, to identify quickly who had power and who didn't, who was worth the time and who wasn't, that part doesn't always know when to stand down. She had a habit. A reflex, really. She categorized people on sight. Not maliciously, she would have told you she wasn't that kind of person. Most people who do this would tell you they aren't that kind of person. But she did it. Fast. Automatically. Like breathing. And for 22 years, that habit had never cost her a single thing. Until March. He grew up in rural Tennessee. 3rd of 6 children. 2-bedroom house. His father left when he was 9 years old, packed a bag on a Wednesday night and never came back. His mother worked double shifts at a diner and a laundromat to keep the lights on. He told an interviewer once, and I want you to remember this line, because it explains almost everything about what happens later. I learned early that people judge the wrapper. Not what's inside. So I stopped worrying about the wrapper. He stopped worrying about the wrapper. He wore what was clean. What was functional. What got him from point A to point B without drawing attention or wasting mental energy on things he decided were irrelevant. That philosophy didn't change when his circumstances changed. And his circumstances did change, dramatically. The book he wrote at 43 became a quiet word-of-mouth success that eventually wasn't quiet at all. The speaking engagements followed. Then the television appearances. Then the second book. Then the third. By the time of our story, he was one of the most sought-after speakers in his field. His calendar was booked 18 months out. His work had been cited in academic journals, translated into 14 languages, and referenced by senators on the floor of Congress. He still wore the same kind of clothes he wore when he had nothing. Not because he couldn't afford otherwise. Not because he was making a point. Because to him, it was never about the clothes. On the morning of the incident, he was moving between two cities back to back. He'd spoken at an event the night before, grabbed 4 hours of sleep in an airport hotel, and caught a 6 a.m. flight to make it to the conference on time. He hadn't had time to change. He walked into that hotel lobby looking like a man who'd been on the road for 3 days. Because he had been. The conference was called the Regional Leadership and Professional Excellence Summit. The kind of event where business cards get exchanged over catered breakfast and people wear their titles like armor. The kind of room where appearances are noted, tallied, and remembered. She was there representing her firm. Staying current, staying visible, staying in the rooms where decisions got made. He was a last-minute addition to the program. A keynote speaker had cancelled 2 weeks prior, family emergency, and the organizers had made some calls. His name wasn't in the printed schedule. It wasn't on the signage in the lobby. If you had picked up the conference booklet that morning, you would not have known he was coming. It was just before 9 a.m. She was moving through the lobby with a colleague, someone she'd known for years, someone she was comfortable with. They were deep in conversation. She was energized. In her element. He came through the revolving door from the street, carry-on behind him, jacket that had seen better days, reading something on his phone. They arrived at the elevator bank at roughly the same time. He pressed the button. She glanced at him. Later, the 4 people who witnessed what happened next would describe it almost identically. She looked at him the way people sometimes look at someone they've already decided, in an instant, doesn't belong. And then she said, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. I don't know why they let just anyone into these things anymore. She said it to her colleague. But she said it at him. Then she laughed. Lightly. The way you laugh at something so obvious it barely registers as a comment at all. He looked up from his phone. He looked at her. He said nothing. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. He stepped in. She stepped in. Her colleague stepped in. The doors closed. Silence. He got off at 22. She rode to 30. At 11 o'clock that morning, she was seated in the main conference hall with approximately 1,400 other attendees. The MC took the stage. Welcomed the audience. Made a few remarks about the day's program. And then he said there was a special addition to the agenda. A last-minute keynote. Someone they were very fortunate to have with them. He read the name. He read the credentials. He read the titles of the books. The accolades. The organizations. The honors. And the name, and the face that appeared on the screen behind the stage, the screen that stretched 40 feet across the back of that room. Belonged to the man from the elevator. The man in the crumpled jacket. The man she had decided, in 4 seconds, didn't belong. Multiple people who were in that room that day were later asked to describe what happened when she realized who he was. They all described the same thing. They said she went still. Not visibly upset. Not covering her face. Not making a scene. Just, still. The kind of still that happens when something shifts inside you and the outside of you hasn't caught up yet. He gave a 45-minute talk. He spoke about judgment. About the stories we construct around strangers before they've said a single word to us. About the invisible sorting we all do, by appearance, by age, by the condition of someone's jacket, and about the cost of that sorting. Not just to the people being sorted, but to ourselves. He talked about growing up in a house where his mother worked 2 jobs and still couldn't keep the car running. About the way certain people looked at her in certain rooms. About how that look burrowed into him as a child and taught him, earlier than any child should have to learn, exactly how the world worked. And he talked about what he chose to do with that knowledge. He never mentioned the elevator. Not once. Not a word. Not a glance toward any particular section of the room. Pause. But the 4 people from the lobby knew. And in a room of 1,400, that's all it takes. By the end of the day, the story was moving through that conference the way stories move through closed spaces. Quietly at first. Then everywhere at once. People who hadn't witnessed it knew the outline by dinner. People who had witnessed it were already telling their version. And somewhere in that hotel, in a room on the 30th floor, she was sitting alone with what she had done. Here's where most people stop telling this story. The viral version ends with the irony. The cosmic justice of watching someone get caught by the exact judgment they handed out in a hotel lobby before 9 a.m. And look, there's something satisfying about that ending. I understand it. But that's not where this story ends. 2 weeks after the conference, he received a message through his publisher's contact form. It was from her. She didn't have to send it. There was no professional obligation. No legal reason. No audience to perform for. No LinkedIn moment waiting on the other side. Just a private message to a man she had wronged. She identified herself. She told him she had been at the conference. She told him she had been at the elevator. And she wrote, I'm paraphrasing here because the full letter has never been made public, she wrote something to the effect of, I've spent 2 weeks trying to convince myself I wasn't the person in that elevator. I was. I'm sorry. He wrote back. One line. I know. I forgave you before you got off the elevator. I've read that line probably 40 times. And every time, something happens that I don't quite have a word for. Because think about what that means. He was standing in that elevator, after what she said, with 4 witnesses and a silence that swallowed the whole ride up, and he had already let it go. Not because it didn't matter. Not because he didn't feel it. But because somewhere on the long road between a 2-bedroom house in Tennessee and a 40-foot screen in a conference hall, he had learned that carrying other people's cruelty is a weight you choose to set down. Or don't. He included that exchange, with her permission, in his next book. The chapter is called, The Elevator Test. His argument is this. Every single day, we step into an elevator with someone we have already decided doesn't matter. The question, he writes, is not whether we judge. We do. All of us. It's wired in. It's fast. It's automatic. The question is, what do we do with it? Do we let it out? Do we let it live in our posture, our silence, the way we don't quite make eye contact? Or do we catch it? Name it. And choose something else? She still works in her industry. She gave one public interview in which she addressed what happened. She described it as the most embarrassing moment of her professional life. And then, almost in the same breath, she said it was also the most clarifying. Because in 22 years of building a career, she had never once stopped to examine the reflex. The fast judgment. The instant sort. The 4-second verdict delivered in a hotel lobby to a man whose name she didn't know and whose story she hadn't asked. It had never cost her anything. Until it did. He still travels. Still speaks. Still answers his own email, apparently, which people find either charming or unbelievable depending on who you ask. And yes, he still dresses exactly the same way. This story went viral, I think, not because of the embarrassment. Plenty of public humiliation stories go viral and disappear by Thursday. This one stayed. Because somewhere in the gap between the elevator and the stage, between the cruelty and the forgiveness, between 4 seconds of judgment and 1 line of grace, there's something every single person watching this recognizes. We have all been her. In some lobby. In some parking lot. On some perfectly ordinary Tuesday. We have all looked at a stranger and made a decision in 4 seconds that we never examined, never questioned, and never had to pay for. Most of us never do pay for it. Most of us never find out who that person was. Music at its quietest. Nearly gone. So here's what I want to leave you with. Not the lesson. You already know the lesson. The question. The next time you find yourself in an elevator with someone who doesn't look like they belong in your world. What do you do with the 4 seconds? I want to hear from you, and I mean genuinely. Drop it in the comments. Have you ever been on either side of that elevator? The one who judged, or the one who got judged without a word? No performance required. The most honest answers always rise to the top, and I read every one of them. If this one landed somewhere real, the like button helps this story reach people who need to hear it. That's not a line. That's just how this works. And if you want to see what happens when someone who has spent a lifetime judging others ends up on the receiving end, in a way that unravels everything they thought they knew about themselves, that story is coming next week. Subscribe so you're there when it drops. I'll see you then.